And that's all. You know, the new generations are coming up, and I'm glad that there's willingness to from the leaders of our sport, like Sabalenka, to really step up and really understand the dynamics of how the tennis politics works, and understand the nuances and really what needs to be done, not only for her benefit and well-being, but for everyone. So and that's a true leadership for me. I think that she needs to maintain that, and I salute that. So that's all I have to say about that.
Novak Djokovic is not someone who speaks carelessly. After everything he has been through in his career, every controversy, every battle, every moment where the establishment came down hard on him, he learned a long time ago to choose his words with precision. So when he decides to open his mouth and point a finger directly at the WTA, you better believe it means something. And that is exactly what happened. Djokovic stepped forward and made his position on Alex Eala's situation at the Italian Open crystal clear, and the tennis world is still buzzing from it. This is not just another player making noise. This is the greatest of all time putting his name on the line for a young woman who, in his eyes, is being treated in a way that simply cannot be defended. And honestly, once you hear the full story, it is very hard to argue with him. Let us go back to the beginning, because to truly understand why this moment matters so much, you have to understand who Alex Eala is and what she represents. She is not a household name yet in the way that Djokovic or Swiatek or Sabalenka are. But in the Philippines, she is something else entirely. She is a symbol. She is the proof that a young girl from a country that has never had a serious presence in professional tennis can rise up and compete with the best players on earth. That is not a small thing. That is a generational achievement. And the weight of that, the pride of an entire nation sitting on your shoulders every time you walk onto a court, that is something most athletes will never fully understand. Eala carries it without complaint. She plays with fire and focus and a kind of quiet determination that is genuinely rare to watch. And yet, here she is, repeatedly finding herself in situations that feel less like bad luck and more like a pattern that nobody in power wants to acknowledge out loud. The Italian Open should have been a celebration of everything she has built. Instead, it became another chapter in a story that keeps repeating itself, and Djokovic finally had enough of watching it unfold in silence. He came out and said plainly that the WTA, rather than standing behind one of its own competitors, seems far more preoccupied with managing its own image. That is a serious accusation. That is someone with 24 Grand Slam titles essentially telling a governing body that they are failing in their most basic responsibility. And the specific incident that brought all of this to a head was the court assignment. Now, some people hear that and immediately think it is a trivial complaint, a minor logistical detail that gets blown out of proportion by fans looking for something to be angry about. But those people have never competed at the highest level of professional sports, and it shows. Court assignments at major tournaments are not trivial. They are a statement. They tell the world how much the organization values a particular player. A bigger court means more eyes, more energy, a louder crowd, greater atmosphere. It means the tournament is saying, this person matters, come and watch. A smaller court sends a different message entirely, and every player knows it. When Alex Eala, one of the most exciting young players in the women's game and the single greatest tennis player her country has ever produced, gets handed a smaller venue despite her achievements and her drawing power, that is not an oversight. That is a decision. And Djokovic called it exactly what it was, poor scheduling and a failure to give her the platform she had earned. But here is the thing. That court assignment, as infuriating as it is just the most recent entry in a much longer list. To really feel the weight of what is happening, you have to rewind even further, back to the Australian Open, and a moment that genuinely left people shaking their heads. Eala was deep in a match, fighting hard, building momentum, and she struck a ball that landed inside the line. Visible to anyone watching closely. The mark was right there on the clay. By every standard, that point belonged to her. But the call came back out. And okay, wrong calls happen in tennis. It is a fast sport and officials make mistakes. What is not supposed to happen, what violates the fundamental logic of how the sport operates, is what came next. Instead of simply giving the point to her opponent, the officials decided to replay it entirely. A do-over. Just like that. No clear justification, no rule that actually supports that decision, just a replay handed out in a moment that happened to go against Eala. And if you know anything about competitive tennis, you know that momentum is everything. A single point can shift the entire psychological dynamic of a match. Taking away a point Eala had legitimately won and forcing a replay is not a small thing. It is the kind of ruling that plants doubt in a player's mind, that makes them hesitate when they need to be decisive, that quietly chips away at confidence at exactly the wrong moment. And that is before we even get to the backpack incident, which, honestly, still feels almost unreal when you describe it out loud. Eala was in the middle of a match against Iga Swiatek. Now, let that sink in for a moment. Iga Swiatek. Multiple Grand Slam titles, former world number 1, arguably the most dominant force in women's tennis over the last several years. For a young player to be standing across the net from her and actually competing, actually threatening to cause an upset, that is not something you see every day. And Eala was doing exactly that. She was locked in, playing with precision and aggression, building the kind of momentum that makes players dangerous. The crowd was feeling it. There was genuine electricity in the air. This was one of those moments that tournaments are made for. And then, right in the middle of it, an official walked over and decided that was the perfect time to raise an issue about what was in Eala's backpack. Her backpack. In the middle of a match. Against Swiatek. With momentum building. The interruption shattered the rhythm she had spent the entire match constructing, and anyone who watched what happened after knows that she was never quite able to recapture it. Now, is it possible that was all innocent? Technically, yes. Officials have responsibilities and sometimes things come up at inconvenient times. But you have to look at the full picture. You have to see this incident not in isolation but as part of a sequence: the bad call in Australia, the replayed point, the smaller court in Rome, the backpack disruption against arguably the toughest opponent she has faced. When does a series of unfortunate coincidences stop being coincidental? That is the question Djokovic is implicitly asking, and he is not asking it quietly. He is not standing at a podium demanding investigations or calling press conferences. That is not his style. He said himself that he has been watching from the side, that he was not part of the meetings or the conversations happening behind closed doors. But he was clear that his position is not up for debate. He supports the players. He has always supported stronger players standing within the structure of the sport. And in this case, that support lands squarely on Alex Eala's side. And here is why that matters in a way that goes beyond just one person's opinion. Djokovic has spent decades navigating the politics of professional tennis. He has been on the wrong side of crowd sentiment, media narratives, governing body decisions, all of it. He was barred from competing in certain tournaments over vaccination status. He has faced hostility from fans and press alike. He has been the villain in stories he did not write. So when he looks at what is happening to Eala and says this is not right, he is not speaking from a position of ignorance or naivety. He is speaking from direct experience. He knows what institutional bias feels like. He knows how organizations protect themselves at the expense of individual athletes. And he recognizes those patterns in what is playing out around this young woman from the Philippines. The WTA, for its part, has not exactly covered itself in glory through all of this. An organization dedicated to promoting and protecting women's tennis should be the loudest voice in the room when one of its players is being treated unfairly. It should be demanding better court assignments, reviewing controversial officiating decisions, and making sure that a player competing against the likes of Swiatek is not getting blindsided by administrative interruptions during critical moments. Instead, the silence from the top has been deafening. And Djokovic is essentially standing in that silence and saying, someone has to speak. There is also something deeply important about what Eala herself represents in the broader context of the sport. Tennis has always had a complicated relationship with diversity and global representation. The traditional powerhouses, the countries that consistently produce Grand Slam champions, form a fairly narrow club. The Philippines has never been part of that conversation. Until now. Eala's rise is not just a personal story. It is a cultural moment. It is a signal to millions of young girls across Southeast Asia that this sport belongs to them too, that the courts of Paris and Rome and Melbourne and London are not exclusively reserved for players from a handful of nations. That is powerful. That is the kind of story that grows the sport, that expands its audience, that gives tennis a relevance in parts of the world where it has historically struggled to take root. And the WTA, of all organizations, should understand that. It should be nurturing that story, amplifying it, making Alex Eala the centerpiece of a narrative about the global future of women's tennis. What it should not be doing is assigning her smaller courts and allowing officiating controversies to stack up without accountability. The contrast between what should be happening and what is actually happening is stark, and it is becoming harder to ignore. And look, there are people who will push back on all of this. There are always people who prefer to see these things as isolated incidents, who caution against reading too much into scheduling decisions or referee calls. That is a legitimate instinct. You do not want to build a conspiracy theory out of every bad break. But the threshold for concern should not be so high that you need irrefutable proof of deliberate sabotage before you acknowledge that something feels wrong. When a player of Eala's caliber, with her achievements, her global significance, her growing fan base, keeps finding herself on the wrong end of decisions that matter, the burden of explanation should fall on the institution, not the player. And right now, the institution is not explaining anything. Djokovic is filling that void with clarity and credibility, and the tennis world is paying attention. Think about what it means for a player like Eala to have someone like him in her corner. It does not change the decisions that have already been made. It does not undo the replayed point or give her back the bigger court. But it does something else. It validates what she has been experiencing. It tells her and everyone watching that this is not in her head. It is real. It is visible. And people with authority and platforms see it too. That kind of validation can be quietly transformative for an athlete still finding their footing at the elite level. Eala, for her part, has been handling all of this with a composure that is nothing short of remarkable. She understands the politics. She has said as much. She knows that tennis, like any major professional sport, is not a purely meritocratic space, that off-court factors influence opportunities and treatment in ways that are frustrating and sometimes infuriating. And she keeps showing up anyway. She keeps competing. She keeps pushing. Because that is who she is. And frankly, the fact that she has gotten this far, that she has become the greatest player her country has ever produced, while navigating all of this, says everything you need to know about her character and her ability. The Italian Open may not have gone the way she or her supporters hoped. But her story is far from over. She is young. She is talented. She is driven. And she now has visibility, attention, and the vocal support of the most decorated player in the history of the sport. That is not nothing. That is actually quite a lot. The question going forward is whether the WTA chooses to course correct, whether it decides that protecting its image actually requires treating its players with genuine fairness and respect rather than just projecting the appearance of it. Because right now, the gap between how this organization presents itself and how it behaves towards someone like Eala is visible and growing. And with Djokovic watching from the side, with fans paying closer attention than ever, and with Eala herself refusing to shrink or disappear, that gap is going to be very difficult to quietly close.